This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, everybody. So again, welcome to the Weber versus Campus Ivy essentially process changes. The idea behind this call is to kind of provide to you all at the institution a way of understanding what the different changes are as far as the processes goes between the two organizations. So essentially what you were doing with Weber versus what you will now be doing in Campus Ivy. So there is several clients on the call. So whether you were an enterprise client with Weber, which you use a student-initiated process, or if you were an essentials client with Weber, where you initiated the process for the student, essentially entering their information in our system, you can go either way. So we don't categorize clients differently in that sense. So for those clients that were an enterprise client with Weber, um, essentially I'm gonna go through the steps of a new student, a brand new student, and kind of show everybody, again, whether you're enterprise or essentials, how the process is for a new student. So once you log into your environment, and most of the schools that are on the call, you guys already have access. You've been slowly working into the system, understanding the different changes in process. And again, this is just to clarify anything for everybody. So once you log on into your workflow page, is what you see here on the screen. Essentially, what is it that I need to do? So on a daily basis, I'm going to cover the three areas on a daily basis, what the institution essentially is responsible for. So essentially, when you log into your environment, the first area is going to be this links section. So here you could do several things. You have your reports. You also have your manual packages where you'll be updating your students. And then you have important information links. So this is the first area I will cover. The second area I'm going to go ahead and cover is the document tracking area. And then lastly, the last area I will cover is the funding estimate. Now, I won't go into too much depth of the funding estimate and how it calculates, but I will be showing you how the process works as far as electronically signing funding estimates and how that process is easily done. As if you do have any questions or concerns regarding the tuition or how your funding estimate is populating, that is something that will happen separately. You will email Reggie, Ravi, or myself if you have issues with your funding estimate and calculating and how it's calculating tuition costs and things of that nature. And we'll definitely dive into that and schedule a call with you. Okay. So again, to begin, as a brand new student, there are several ways on how you can have your student register themselves within the system. It can be done manually where you as the institution are entering the student's information, or it can be done through the student self-registration. So under the links section, you'll have important information links. Once you click on that, it's going to bring you to a page or to a link where you're going to be able to copy the actual URL. So I'm going to click here and copy the URL. And what's going to happen here is that you can either provide that to your IT department for them to put that on your website if you choose to, and you would just essentially direct your students to go to the website to complete the student self-registration, or you could just send it to them in an email. So once they type in the link into their web browser, it's going to bring them to the student self-registration. Now, based on your institution, whether your student information system or SIS provides student IDs, 99% of the time you don't provide that ID to the student right away. They'd have to be added into the system before. But if you're an institution that also does not provide student IDs, you will have an opportunity to enter this in. So again, this is an optional field for the student. So again, this is a student completing these different tabs of the student self-registration. So I'm going to go ahead and quickly walk you guys through a student here. and you will have a chance to validate all this information. Now this SMS opt-out option here, this is essentially for a student. If they would like to not receive text messaging from the actual school, they would choose yes to opt out. But again, as it states here, if you would like to receive text messages from the school, they would choose no. So you're gonna highly recommend that your students choose no here. Again, this will send out all those notifications the system will be sending out. And of course, it's gonna mask your actual, it's gonna mask the Campus Ivy. The notification will come as if it's coming from your actual institution. Okay, and then on this institution info tab, they'll essentially be able to choose their program from the dropdown if you're an institution that has multiple programs. And if you're an institution that has multiple locations, they'll be able to choose a location here and enter in their start date. Okay, and I'm just gonna put today's date, and then they'll choose their proof of graduation. The proof of graduation they enter here, they're gonna wanna use the proof of graduation that they reported on their actual FAFSA. So with our system, it does create a file automatically that will gather the program information, the student's ICER information, their demographic information. It creates that file and it sends it off to COD, and COD will then match that file. So if the student had accidentally reported GED here, but on their FAFSA they reported high school, that's going to cause a reject for our disbursement team when they're going to go ahead and try to process the student for payment. So again, you want to match whatever they inputted on the actual FAFSA. And then view tuition cost and financial estimate, they're always going to want to choose yes. Similar to what you were doing with Weber, it is going to try to create a automated financial estimate for the student. But again, this is a test student, so it's not going to populate that here for us because there's no ICER on file, but it will read the ICER and kind of provide a student a snapshot of what their eligibility would look like. So once this says the students congratulated once they complete the process, and then it will advise them that in this case, we could not generate a funding estimate because there was no ICER on file, just to contact the institution for that information. Okay, so what this process again is the enterprise process at Weber, the student initiated process. The difference between the two is that a student would need to do this every academic year. With Campus Ivy, the student will only need to do this once. And in addition to that, what the student would complete on the Weber interface would be a lot longer steps for the student to get through the process. But with Campus Ivy, again, it's just going to be this one time that the student does this, and thereafter, the institution will be updating and validating students' credits, enrollment statuses, and things of that nature, which I'll go into here in a short bit. Now, once a student has fully registered at the institution, it is not going to notify you. So again, this as part of your daily process, again, is checking the manual package section, which I mentioned earlier on in the call. So manual package is part of your daily process. This important information links, again, it's not something that's necessarily a daily thing. If you're entering it on your website or if you're sending out generic blast emails, then the URL that you're going to be using will never change. But as part of your daily process, again, it will be the manual package link here. So once I click on that, again, it's going to default to students that are already existing within your environment. But if I wanted to capture this new package that the student went and self-registered, I'm going to change the packaging type to student-initiated packages. So under student-initiated packages, here is where I can have either this one student, of course, that we registered, or we'll have multiple students, depending on how large your institution is and things of that nature. So here is the opportunity where I have to validate this information. So in order to validate the information, you would just select edit. And now you're going to be required to enter in a student ID, a graduation date, and then if you need to update the academic or FA units, you can do as well. But what you're most importantly going to be doing is validating all the information that the student entered. So their first name, their last name, the program, make sure they chose the correct program, make sure they chose the correct start date. You're going to want to make sure that their social security number is accurate, their date of birth, whether they're reporting themselves as citizen is accurate as well. Now, for those students that are eligible non-citizens, they would actually enter in no here. So is citizen value will be a no. But if they are a US citizen, it is always a yes. Their email, their phone number, you want to make sure it's correct. SMS opt-out, you want to make sure that this says no. And then their address information. If you click over to the next tab, it's going to bring you to where you can validate their proof of graduation and their location. By default, every new student will have a SAP status as met. And then the warnings or errors is just notifying you that this student is new and will be added to the system. And the errors is the grad date, which I mentioned is one of those values that you're going to enter. So as far as the ID, I'm going to go ahead and put an ID. And then I'm going to provide a graduation date. But just to show you the validations within the system or the errors within the system, if I go to try to update this, I still have an error here, so it will not allow me to process this imported package. So if I click process this imported package, should give me here an error, and it did not. Let me go back here. Oh, yep, here it is. So if you notice, it did bring me to this page here, but that student is not here. What if I click back to student initiated packages? That student is still here under errors. So to update that, again, I'm just gonna clear this error by updating the graduation date. Right. And then I select update, and this error, this X under the errors will be removed. So at this point, I could be validating several students at once, clearing those errors, and once those errors are removed, simply select process import packages, and it's gonna bring me to, again, submitted packages. So again, it's gonna bring me to the screen where all my students are housed, and is now gonna include this new student registration. Okay, and that new student will actually be at the very top of the list here once you add them. Now, if you are a Essentials client where you are manually adding in your students, it's just the difference is that you wouldn't use the student self-registration. What you would do is once you're on your workflow page, you're gonna click on that manual packages link, which brings you to the screen that we're on now, and then you're gonna select add new student. And once you do that, it'll open up for you essentially a blank row or column for you to start entering all the students' information here manually. Okay. This page, the student package list, is very important. As you guys have gone through all your disbursement trainings with Diane and that disbursement team, and as you're working through the system, you'll notice that this is what essentially will drive your disbursement process. So updating this information is very important. most importantly and then it's twofold. So it's important for the disbursement side, and it's also going to be important for the NSLDS side if you guys are using our NSLDS service. So once you have added your new students, and I'm just going to use this student here at the top, and there is going to be a mixture of credit and clock hour institutions on this webinar, but I'm going to go through both scenarios of updating the units and enrollment statuses for both types of institutions. Now, with this student that's brand new, if I wanted to go ahead and now this student future start is a prospective student. If I want to go ahead and move the student into an active enrollment, I'm simply going to select edit and then go ahead and choose that active enrollment. In this case, currently attending is considered active. Now, once I'm here, I can make changes to other values for this particular student. So let's say this student came in and actually brought in transfer units, whether they're in credits or in hours, and I'm just going to represent credits here. You're always going to want to apply those transfer units to the earned column because you're accepting those credits as transferred into the current program that they are enrolled in. Same thing with clock hour. If you're accepting 200 hours, you're going to apply the 200 hours here in the earned. Okay. And then I simply select update. Now the system does have its built-in validation. So in this case, it's giving me an error that because I'm changing the student from a future start into an active enrollment, I need to provide a last date of attendance. And the last date of attendance is just that. When was the last day the student attended? Now, just to quickly talk about last date of attendance, for a term institution, you should be updating your last date of attendance basically at the end of each term or at the beginning of each term. For your clock hour institutions, this is something that should be done on a daily basis because obviously those types of programs are based on progression as the student is moving through the program. So as you're updating hours, you should be also updating your last date of attendance. So in this case, the last day of attendance errored out. I'm just going to simply go back in, select edit, and change that last date of attendance field, and then select update. The system will go again through its validation, and once it is processed, it will highlight orange. Okay, so you can make as many updates as you like on the screen at once. Once you move away from the screen, let's say if an institution has more than 500 students, because this can house up to 500 students on one screen. If you move to the next screen, it's going to go ahead and remove this orange highlight here. So I'm just going to refresh the screen here. Okay, so I refreshed the screen here. Now, that's for a new student. So let's say you're dealing with a new start, you're able to, obviously now you understand how to change that enrollment status. Now that that student is active, the disbursement team can now pick up that student and move that student through the disbursement process. Now, as far as updating your current students, that is also all going to be done here. So most of this information you were updating, of course, on the Weber side, you were doing it through the Sure interface. So enrollment statuses are being updated for your clock hour schools. You're updating your units there. Term-based schools, you're updating either if it was self-initiated by the student, they will be updating their enrollment status that way, whether they're full-time, three-quarter time, part-time, or less than half-time, they will be doing it there. The difference with Weber and us is that, again, the institution will be doing all their updates through here in one place. So you're not going to be working in two different systems. And not only that, it's a real-time thing. So once a student goes through the process of being added, it doesn't take the system about 24 hours to update. It updates right away. And there's a lot of moving pieces that are occurring once a new student is added to the system. Now, as far as your new students, so if I'm dealing with a certain cohort or a start date that I would like to update, this interface is in a report format. So I'm able to apply filters. If I click on these 3 dotted lines here, I'm able to sort. I'm able to add filters if I like. And very easily I can click and drag the column header up to the top bar, and the screen will be sorted by start date. If I don't want to go through all of that as clicking and dragging, I could just simply click on the start date, and it's going to put the student or the start dates in newest to oldest. Same thing with the last name. It's going to sort for me A to Z. So here's the last names A to Z. So it makes searching for students a little bit easier. Keep in mind, our system is web-based, so you can always use Control F on your keyboard. If you select Control F, it's going to pop up the search bar, and then you can type in the student's name this way. Okay, so I'm looking for Jones. I have several Jones here. Now I need to look for the correct Jones that I'm working to update, or looking to update, excuse me. Now, as far as updating current student information, okay? So if I'm dealing with a student, I'll use James Anderson here. This is a student that's currently attending, and I'm gonna work with both scenarios. So I'm gonna start with a term-based institution. So with term-based or semester schools, their enrollment status through Weber, either the student or the school would be updating, full-time, which is 12 credits or more, depending on whether it's a graduate, bachelor's, or undergraduate program. Whatever was categorized as 3/4 time, you would just select 3/4 time, less than half-time or half-time. Within our system, the scheduled units is what's going to consider the student full-time, 3/4 time, or half-time. So just to use a generic situation, if the school is a 2-semester school, fall and spring, 12 credits is full-time, considered full-time. I'm going to enter in here 12. So that way the disbursement team knows that that student is scheduled for full-time in the current semester. The schedule column will always represent the current semester that the student is in. So as your students are moving from semester to semester, you're going to be updating the schedule units to 10, whatever they're scheduled to take for that current semester. We talked about transfer units. I'm going to go ahead and talk about remaining units. So remaining units, what you want to look at, the remaining unit is your academic year unit. So what is defined as that program's academic year units? So for a semester school, a term-based school that has 2 semesters in the academic year, 12 credits and 12 credits is considered full-time. This is going to be 24, because that's how much typically a student can take within an academic year. Now, of course, they could take more than 12 credits each semester, but as a basis, it's going to be 24. It's really defined on what the program is looking at. Okay, if you're a quarter-based institution, 36, generally speaking, would be what the student can take. If you're non-standard term, it's essentially whatever you define as full-time would be what you would enter in there. For earn units, I think that's very self-explanatory. This gets updated as your student is progressing from semester to semester. Okay, so as an example, I'm going to use 24 credits here. Let's say this student, they started back in April. Let's just say they've already earned 12 credits. Okay, they're scheduled for 9 currently. And the attempted column is exactly that, what they've attempted so far. So they've earned 12, they've attempted 12. Now let's say this student completes the semester, and I'll just update that just so you guys can see. Okay, I'm just going to refresh the page, acting as if I'm going back in to update the student. Okay, now your updates, as you're updating your students, they will populate by default to the very top. So it will always show you your most recent updates. So here's James Anderson. So now the student completed the semester. I'm going to select edit, and out of the 9 credits that were scheduled, this student only earned 6. So I'm going to enter in here 18 that they've earned. They've their current semester, they're scheduled for 12 credits, or the upcoming semester, and then what they've attempted would be the 9 that they originally attempted in the last semester. So that will bring you to 21. Okay, and then I simply select update. Okay, and the system again goes through that validation. Okay, now for your clock hour institution, I'm going to flip the script here a little bit. For your clock hour institution, it's the same concept, except now you're just reporting hours. So again, if your academic year for remaining is defined as 900 hours, if you have a program that's longer than 900 hours, and you typically define your academic year 900 hours, this is a generic field. This is what you would be entering for the most part for all those students in that particular program, 900. For the earned, again, as they're progressing through the program, let's just say they've earned up to this date 300 hours. And then the scheduled is going to be whatever is scheduled typically for the payment period. So this is a 900 academic year, so what's scheduled for the payment period will be 450. If you're dealing with a program that is only 600 hours, and that's the length of the program, this is 600, but what the payment period will be 300, which is half of that, the 600. If the student has progressed into academic year 2, if you're again dealing with a program greater than 900 hours, the remaining for that academic year, if it's a 1,200-hour program, then it's 300. Okay, that's going to be scheduled in an academic year, and then what's scheduled, of course, will stay at the 300 here. I clicked on the schedule by accident. Let me just refresh the page, sorry. Okay, so here's my student here. So again, 300 for they've progressed into academic year 2 for this clock hour program. 300 is what they're scheduled for the academic year, and schedule is 300, which essentially will be the payment period in this case. And then attempted is what they've attempted. So what they, in a credit world, again, what they attempted is it's going to include both failed and passed courses. Okay, earned is only going to include what they have earned. Okay, the attempted, again, for in a clock hour world, would be whatever they've earned so far. So in this case, it'll be 905. Okay, so just to recap again, transferred, you're always going to include transfer units in your earned units, because if you're considering it a transferred, it's going to be included in your earned. Remaining is going to represent an academic year. Okay, what essentially that program considers a full-time student in an academic year, in a semester or clock hour situation, whether it's 900 hours, 24 credits, 36 credits, anything like that. And then your earned, again, is whatever they've earned up to date. And then scheduled is what they're currently scheduled in the payment period or in the term. So in your term, in the term world, semester world, 12 credits, they're scheduled for 12. 6, if they're scheduled for 6, which is half time, or they can be less than half time, which is 5, but we're talking about undergraduate programs. Graduate programs, sometimes it's considered 9 credits full time, just depends. And then for non-standard term, also depends what's considered full time. So sometimes it's considered 6 for non-standard term schools. Okay, so again, just keep that in mind. Schedule is looking at the term or is looking at the payment period. Okay, and then again, attempted is going to include both their students failed and earned credits or hours. the most important thing that should be and always be accurate is going to be your earned and what your earned credits, because this is what's going to drive that disbursement process. Okay, as processors on campus Ivy side, we do look at everything. We are looking to make sure the student is actively attending. We are looking at the earned credits. So if you're creating funding estimates with credits in a term world, we're just ensuring that those credits match whatever the student is currently scheduled for. So we're always double checking everything. Okay. So I'll move away from that, and I'm going to go ahead now and talk about enrollment statuses. And I'll just update that. So enrollment statuses in our system does not always translate the same way as it did in Weber. Weber's enrollment statuses was whether the student was full-time, part-time, half-time, what have you. In our system, it is what the student, it's the status that we're going to be sending to NSLDS. Is this student an active student? Is the student withdrawn, graduate, on a leave of absence, anything like that? So James Anderson, I'll use the same student here. This student was actively attending, and they decided to withdraw. So I come into here, the manual package, and I go to enrollment status and I update the student to withdrawn. With a withdrawn status, you're always going to want to make sure as well that you have a withdrawn date. Okay. So, and if you do forget, that's fine. If I click update here, the system's going to tell me, hey, you're missing a withdrawn date. So I just go ahead and hit OK. Those error messages will be exact, and they'll let you know exactly what area you need to update for the particular student. So I go here, select edit. I go to academic info, and now I'm going to enter in a withdrawn date, and I'll just put today's date. Oops. And then I select update. Okay, system goes through its validation, and then it'll update the student to withdrawn. And that goes the same, again, from moving a student from a future start status, which is a prospective student, to an active status. You just simply change the enrollment status. If you're moving a student to even a graduate status. So if this student right here that let's do Kevin Jones here. If I hit edit on Kevin, and now this student has graduated, I select graduated, and I select update. Okay. Okay, so now the student has been updated to a graduated status. Okay. So that's the differences. Of course, this is what's going to drive your disbursement process, updating this on a daily basis. You know, if you're a clock hour institution, then this is something that you'll probably be in here a couple of times a week. If you're a semester school, this may be something that you'll update at the beginning of each semester or 2 weeks before the semester as your students are getting scheduled for their classes. And then periodically, you might be updating enrollment statuses for students in a term or semester institution if they're withdrawing, going on a leave of absence, things like that. Okay. Now, another area that's part of the daily process is going to be that document tracking section. So, which is a little bit different than what you guys were used to at Weber. So Weber really did a file review for verification students. We do a full file review for all students, and that just is no additional fee to your service. It just ensures that you are 100% compliant in all documents, both academic documents and financial aid documents. Once you add your students, a new student, whether you're using the self-registration process or if you're adding your students manually, and then also on the call, we have some schools that are integrated between the information system. So updating, they would just need to update your student information system, and all that information gets transferred to us automatically. But 99% of the clients will be using that manual package. So once you add your new student, again, I had mentioned earlier, a lot of things are happening in the system, a lot of automation. So essentially it's creating a profile page for that student. So I'm going to refresh the dashboard here. I just clicked on that button and you're going to see the document tracking had increased to 19 because I had added that student. So once I go in and click onto document tracking, this is again going to highlight for me any students that have any outstanding documentation. So again, this is part of your daily process, going in here, managing this, getting your students through the process, okay? So we added this student right here today, and you can always click updated date, and this, so this is putting from oldest to newest. I'm gonna click it one more time, and it's gonna bring up the newest to oldest students that were added. Okay, so here's that student that we added. And essentially this is the profile page that's created. Now the student doesn't have an ICER out here, of course, but in that case, they would have an ICER here if the student did complete their FAFSA. But then here's a set of documents that would trigger up. This is all different based on the institution. So yours may be different than this set of document listing, but for this particular institution, this is what was configured, okay? So a couple of things happen. Again, this document tracking occurs. Now, a big question that comes up a lot is the entrance counseling, whether that entrance counseling piece that they had satisfied the Department of Education. But with our system, we require those students to go out to studentloans.gov to complete that entrance counseling. And it's the same place that they will go out to complete their master promissory note and things of that nature. So once a student completes their master promissory note, they just move to the entrance counseling document under the studentloans.gov and they complete that. One thing I do want to emphasize is that there is an automation with the MPN and entrance counseling. And to take advantage of that MPN and entrance counseling automation, one key thing that you need to do is make sure that the student that you're working with is in our system, in the core system, prior to that student going out to studentloans.gov and completing the MPN and entrance counseling. In addition to that, they would need to complete a brand new MPN and entrance counseling. So if the student is a prior student that has used loans in the past and they go out and they just simply add your school code to that MPN, we will not receive that MPN electronically. That goes the same for the entrance counseling. So you're going to want to instruct students to complete a brand new MPN and entrance counseling. That way it eliminates you having to upload the document. In addition, again, just to repeat myself, the student would need to be added into the system first. So once you add your student, so I added the student today and I instruct the student either now or later on today or tomorrow, hey, go out to studentloans.gov and complete your MPN and entrance counseling. Within 24 hours, we will receive an electronic copy of that MPN and entrance counseling. And they will automatically flip the student master promissory note document and your entrance counseling into a received status. So those are two less documents that you would have to upload. Okay, so those are two key things you want to make sure that happens. Is a brand new MPN and entrance counseling and the student is added into the system prior to them going out to studentloans.gov and completing those two documents. Okay, now as far as the other documents, they're essentially self-explanatory. What Campus Ivy is going to be looking for is, making sure that everything is signed, everything's initialed. Start date on the enrollment agreement matches the start date that was given to us in the system, entered in the system. Credits, units, all that makes sense with what the funding estimate is providing to us. The identification, we match it, we put everything up against the ICER. So we match everything up against the ICER. Social, name, date of birth, all of that gets verified as a second review as part of your service. Now, if at any point there's a document that we reject, Campus Ivy will always, and I'm just gonna put these all in a receive status. Okay, and then let's just say after reviewing, we rejected the FAFSA here, we rejected this one. So as Campus Ivy personnel will reject, we have the ability to reject the documents, of course, and then we apply a feedback or reason to it. These feedback or reasons are very vague, but the reason why we apply that feedback or reason is because it allows you to easily identify any students that we reviewed later on. So, and I'll show you that what I mean here shortly. So let's just say there's some conflicting information that we found on the student's FAFSA. Okay, so as Campus Ivy personnel will go ahead and update that status, and now it's a rejected status. But in addition to that, we're going to add a note for that particular reject, again, because these are very vague. So if I add a note, Campus Ivy will just select create. They're gonna closely identify the note type with the document. If it's several documents, they may just say rejected documents. In this case, it was conflicting information what I chose, so I'm going to select conflicting information, and I'm just going to stay okay. And then we do make it a priority. Making it a priority will bold that particular note. And bolding that note just means for you at the institution, hey, I need to look at this particular note. Okay, and then we provide more elaboration here. Now, the note section is a one-way communication, okay? It's only for us to be able to send to the schools for the school's attention. Outside of that, your school will not have any ability to add a note in here. Now, in addition to that, the purpose of the note section is to just provide more clarity for that particular reject. It eliminates, emails going back and forth and things of that nature. So again, remember, it's a one-way communication. Now, this student I rejected, so Campus Ivy reviewed the student. And if I go ahead and I'm just going to refresh this note section or the document tracking section. And the document tracking section, now here where it says feedback or reason, you're going to be able to filter by the feedback or reason. And all I did was click it twice. So by clicking it once, it brought all the feedback reasons to the bottom. Clicking it a third or second time brought it all the way to the top. So now here I can clearly identify the students that Campus Ivy has reviewed and they have some type of issue or a document rejected. And I could quickly work these students and get them moving through the process. Okay. Now, as far as document tracking itself and how that process works, in order for a student to move from one step to the other, and I'm going to pick a different student here. Let's pick Michael Jackson. And all I'm going to do is just replicate as if the student has everything in a received status, okay? And then here on the home screen, this is all occurring in real time. As soon as all those documents are in a received status, I refresh the dashboard. You're gonna see this document tracker of 19 move to 18, and that one student, Michael Jackson, has now moved over to the received bucket. So at this point is when Campus Ivy will have 24 hours to review this particular student and whether move that student into the approved bucket or move them back into the needed bucket, whether we found some issues with it or not. You will have every institution has an assigned representative. You will be using the support.campusivy.com in order to place your tickets in, but the difference is now that your assigned representative is the one that will be responsible for answering you directly. So it doesn't go through different hands. Everybody, it goes to that one person. Okay, and again, 24 hours response on both tickets and on both document tracking. Okay, and then of course, once it comes into here, we have the 24 hours to review, and then we'll just either approve it, and then you'll know in real time. So if I go in here as a Campus Ivy representative, and I reject the particular document for the student, I just click on the student's name. And I'm just gonna reject this document here. Okay, and then I go back here to the dashboard and I refresh the dashboard or your workflow page. you'll see that the student now moved back over here to the left. So the dashboard itself, you click refresh by clicking refresh here. If you don't click refresh, this is automatically refreshing every hour, just so you know. And once you go in here, it'll show you that this is obviously was refreshed the last time it was refreshed. Okay. So if you ever see that it's not moving, just click the refresh button here. Okay. Now, the last thing I wanted to talk about was the funding estimates. And essentially with the funding estimate, what I'm going to do is just go over the actual process of the funding estimate. So using that particular electronic signature. So again, just to repeat myself, if anybody joined the call later on, if you have certain questions regarding the configuration of your funding estimate, tuition is not calculating correctly, anything like that, please reach out to myself, Chris, Reggie, or Ravi, and we'll go ahead and get on it, schedule a call with you so we can get that funding estimate correct and accurate for you. So as far as the funding estimate, a lot of this is covered in phase 2 training video. So knowing where to go to create the funding estimate, I won't go into so much, but I will go into the actual process and the real-time feature of a funding estimate. So I'm just going to search up the same student that I added today. And I'm just going to go through the steps of actually creating a funding estimate. Okay, so I click on funding estimates. I select create funding estimate. And this process essentially is going to be replacing the Weber process. Okay, so Weber would create these award notices and get them sent to the student, or they'll send it to you and then you go ahead and send it to the student. With Campus Ivy, this process is initiated by the institution. So it gives you an opportunity to review the student's packaging with the student. It gives you the opportunity to, if the student says, you know what, I don't want to take out all these student loans, things like that, you'll be able to make those adjustments on the funding estimate right then and there. But it really takes a couple of clicks in order to create a funding estimate. So as you saw there, I search for my student, I click funding estimate, I click create. Now I choose my program. I choose my ICER here that I would like to use, which award year. Again, once you click on here, you'll have a drop down. It will pre-fill everything here on the left for you. If you don't have an ICER for a student, you still can create one. The only thing you would need to do is choose a dependency status and also choose whether the student has a bachelor's degree or not. And then you click save. There is a lot of built-in automation behind the funding estimate in regards to SULA, Pell LEU, aggregate sub and unsub limits, EFC, need analysis. It has all of that built in on the back end. And then on top of that, of course, we're applying a second review to the funding estimate for accuracy as well. So it goes through a check in the front end, of course, and then of course we do the check in the back end as well. So as far as the funding estimate, again, I'm just creating a funding estimate, I'm going to be given options on how I want to send this out to the student. So essentially, the first option is a text message signature. This is going to be 99% of the time, this is what you're going to be using to send out this funding estimate or quote unquote award notice to the student. Okay. Now, any changes that have to, well, before I jump into that, so the first initial funding estimate will require that student signature. The send general notification is an email to the student. Now, this will only work if your student portal is turned on. Again, the send general notification will only work if your student portal is turned on. It gives a student opportunity to log onto their portal and apply their signature through the portal instead of using the text message. Again, 99% of the time, you're going to send a text message. So you're going to want to make sure that phone number that the student is either entering during the self-registration or if you're entering it manually is accurate, okay? So with this funding estimate, it's connected to my cellular device, so I'm going to go ahead and hit send for text message. Okay, I'm just going to give the system just a few minutes and I'm going to get a text message. Sure you guys heard that. So I open up my text message, and then just so you can sort of see what the student is seeing themselves, if I go back into the student's profile page after I send that text message, and I look under the notification sections, I'm going to see that request here at the top. Any notification that's being sent out from the student or from the system to the student is going to be shown here. It's going to let you know the type, whether it was deliverable or not, and you will have the opportunity to view it as well. So again, this is the text message I was sent out to the student, and it might be hard for you all to see. I'll just zoom in a little bit, but basically it's greeting the student. This is the funding estimate ID. And then this is the link that is given in the text message that can be clicked on. So that way the student can either be following along with you or again, re-review that particular funding estimate. So I just typed in the browser and I'm gonna click on it to open it up. Just give it a few seconds, it's gonna populate here, so apologize. Okay, so here's that funding estimate. And of course, just imagine this is on a student's mobile device. So they're actually be able to pinch and zoom in and zoom out. In this example, I'm just going to zoom in so you can actually just see that they can see the full view of that funding estimate. Okay, so this of course is unsigned, but it gives them opportunity to review the funding estimate. And what I'm going to do is out of the student, I'm going to text back that code. So if I open up this notification again, there was a code. All right, so again, this funding estimate is good for 72 hours. So once you send it, the student will have 72 hours to sign it. If the 72 hours expires, you just need to resend it again out to the student. So I'm going to text back the code that is requesting. And once I send that text message, I'm going to get an automated response stating that the signature was applied to the funding estimate. And what I'm going to do here is just refresh this screen. And under funding estimate, I'm now going to see that my signature was applied and it's now changed from red to yellow and is pending a staff member signature. So at this point, the staff member will go in and apply their signature. Okay, so you'll see here at the bottom, student signature, it's time stamped, and then of course their phone number essentially. Now on the dashboard, as part of my daily process, I'm going to refresh the dashboard. If I see in this funding estimate section, this is going to highlight for me again, the red just means any unsigned funding estimates. The yellow will represent a pending signature, and then 13 that were signed and approved. So at this point right here, this is the only time that the institution will need to go in here and perform an actual task. So I can click in here and it's going to pull up that same student that we've been working with. And again, I can view that funding estimate by clicking view here. And I can open up that funding estimate. And at this point, of course, at this point, you've reviewed it with the student. They've gone over, they accepted the funding that's on there. And then they would just, you as the institution or staff member would just select sign. Okay, applying your signature, it is going to put your name here on there as well as the date. Okay, so here's my name that I e-signed. And then the last step I would need to do as the institution is select send for processing. So once I select send for processing, the page is going to refresh. And once I log back into, you're going to get a submitted message here. that it was submitted. Still loading. Okay, so now it says submitted. And let me refresh this page here again. So in real time, you'll now see the funding estimate that was sent to the student is now in a receive status. Okay, at that point, you can also view it as well. But essentially, Campus Ivy, again, if all documents are in a receive status, we can click and view and re-review that funding estimate. Now, if a student is requesting a change of funding, or they now come back and they say that I want more loans, they didn't originally take out the full amount of loans, now they want more loans, or they want to reduce loans, or maybe a scholarship came into play and has reduced their loan eligibility, they don't want to take out loans, they're still an active student and you want to change the funding for the student, you simply, the way that's communicated is through a funding estimate. And again, that's initiated by the institution. But what makes it a little bit easier is that because that first initial funding estimate was signed by the student electronically, any subsequent funding estimate will no longer need that student signature. You can, what we call e-passive sign that particular funding estimate. What will occur is that the student will receive a notification that a new funding estimate or award notice, award letter, what have you, was created, and they have the opportunity to view that funding estimate, that change. But all you would simply need to do is, if I wanted to change the funding for this particular student, I'm going to select clone. And let's just say for this example, this student did not want to take out any unsubsidized loans at all for their entire program. Okay, so if I'm just going to take out this unsubsidized loan on both years. Okay, so now that's 0. I'm going to select save just to save those changes. My checkbox is unchecked, if you guys recall from phase 2 of the training video. And if you're making any manual adjustments, just keep in mind that the auto recalc box is unchecked. I do apologize for the speeding, the slowness of the system. And then once it loads up, here's that ePassive option. And I select ePassive signature. Hey, once I do that, it is going to apply both the student and staff member signature to that funding estimate, as you see here. And then again, my last step would be to select send for processing. Okay. Every time this step occurs or these things occur, a funding estimate will be loaded into the system under the document tracking. So as you can see here, this was the first one that we completed. And then here's the second one that we just did because there was a change. Okay. Okay. So essentially that is the process of that's the comparison, the change from what you're doing with Weber as far as the funding estimate, the award notice goes, to the funding estimate. So the funding estimate will replace the award notice. It will replace the start form for those Weber clients. Okay, the manual packages, it's one system. Again, just to recap, manual packages is one area where you will go to update all of your students' information, their credits, enrollment statuses. The student will only need to self-register themselves once. It's not done on an every year basis or every term basis. They do it once, and then the institution will make the updates to the credits for the semester school, for the hours as they progress, to ensure that disbursements are being made for the student, and so on. Of course, if you've all been through the disbursement process, you know that our system goes through certain disbursement criteria checklists. So it's checking for hours, weeks, credits, enrollment status, ICER, making sure verification is completed. So it goes through 100% compliance before we actually disperse any funds for a student. And then again, you're going to want to check your document tracking. So this is a daily task. I know there's a lot of information once you log in, but again, manual package is one daily task, document tracking will be your second, and then what goes along with your document tracking is your funding estimate. If you're an institution that's responsible for approving disbursement batches and things like that, then disbursement batches is an area that you're going to be checking on as well to make sure approved funding to add students if needed on there. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and end the recording now. That does complete the process change webinar.